Welcome back to Untold Crime Legends, the channel where real power, real history, and real street stories come alive. Today, we're diving into a headline that says everything about survival, ambition, and legacy. Bumpy Johnson's family never went hungry. 20 years later, he becomes one of New York's richest black men. This is the powerful transformation story of Ellsworth. Bumpy Johnson, a man born into hardship, who learned early that hunger was the enemy and control was the answer. Growing up in Harlem, when the streets were rough and unforgiving, Bumpy saw struggle up close, and it shaped the way he moved, the way he thought, and the way he protected his own. Even as a young man, he made one promise to himself that never changed. His family would always eat. In a world where opportunity was limited and danger was everywhere, Bumpy relied on intelligence, fearlessness, and discipline to survive. Harlem wasn't just his neighborhood, it was his classroom, teaching him about loyalty, respect, and the cost of weakness. As the years passed, Bumpy didn't just adapt to the underground economy, he mastered it, building power through strategy instead of chaos and influence instead of noise. He dressed sharp, spoke with purpose, and demanded respect in rooms where few black men were ever allowed to lead. 20 years after those hungry childhood days, Bumpy Johnson stood at the top, controlling major rackets, negotiating with powerful crime figures, and becoming one of the richest and most feared black men in New York City. His wealth wasn't just about money, it was about control, protection, and status in a system designed to shut him out. He fed families, supported his community, and ruled Harlem like a king, while law enforcement watched closely and rivals stayed cautious. From a poor kid on the streets to a polished kingpin with unmatched influence, Bumpy's rise was driven by ambition, resilience, intelligence, reputation, loyalty, power, survival instincts, discipline, legacy, and an unbreakable will. Love him or fear him, his story still echoes through New York history, proving that hunger can create monsters or legends. And this was Bumpy Johnson, a name Harlem will never forget. Bumpy Johnson was born into deep poverty, in a world where empty stomachs and unpaid bills were part of everyday life. Hunger wasn't a rare hardship in his home. It was something that hovered constantly, shaping his thoughts from a young age. Watching his family struggle left a lasting mark on him. Even as a child, he understood that survival wasn't guaranteed. Those early years planted a powerful determination inside him that would never fade. As Bumpy grew older, the fear of hunger became his driving force. He saw how easily families could fall apart when there was no food on the table, and he refused to let that be his future. While other kids dreamed small, Bumpy thought in terms of protection and control. His goal wasn't luxury, it was stability. He wanted to make sure that no one connected to him would ever have to worry about where their next meal was coming from. Poverty also taught Bumpy discipline. He learned to value every dollar and every opportunity, knowing how quickly both could disappear. This mindset followed him into the streets, where mistakes were costly and weakness was exploited. He became careful, observant, and calculated, always thinking several steps ahead. Hunger had taught him patience, and patience became one of his greatest weapons. Pressure to provide pushed Bumpy into the underground world, but his reasons were deeply personal. He wasn't chasing fame or chaos. He was chasing security. Every risk he took was weighed against the promise he made to his family. Promise became the line he would never cross, and it guided how he built his reputation and his power. Even as his influence grew, Bumpy never forgot the feeling of having nothing. That memory kept him grounded and sharp. It reminded him why he fought so hard and why failure was never an option. The fear of returning to that life was stronger than any threat from rivals or law enforcement. In the end, Bumpy Johnson's rise wasn't just about power or money. It was about defeating hunger and helplessness. He turned childhood poverty into fuel, transforming desperation into determination. By the time he reached the top, his family was secure, his name carried weight, and the promise he made as a hungry child had been fully kept. Harlem's streets were unforgiving, and growing up in that environment forced Bumpy Johnson to mature fast. Danger wasn't something you heard about, it was something you lived with every day. Sirens, violence, and tension filled the air, teaching him early that the streets didn't care about excuses or good intentions. From a young age, Bumpy understood that survival meant staying alert at all times. Living in Harlem sharpened Bumpy's instincts. He learned how to read people just by the way they walked, talked, or held eye contact. Trust was rare and mistakes were costly. One wrong move could cost you your freedom or your life. These lessons trained him to stay calm under pressure and never act on impulse. The streets taught him that thinking ahead was just as important as being tough. Discipline became a necessity, not a choice. Bumpy saw how reckless behavior led to early graves or prison cells. He studied the outcomes of others and adjusted his behavior accordingly. Instead of chasing chaos, he focused on structure and order. He controlled his emotions, knowing that anger could be used against him. Self-control became one of his strongest traits. Harlem also taught him the importance of reputation. Respect was a form of currency. Once it was lost, it was almost impossible to regain. Bumpy understood that how you carried yourself mattered just as much as what you did. He moved with purpose, spoke carefully, and never made empty threats. Over time, his name alone carried weight in the neighborhood. Survival in Harlem required adaptability. Laws changed, alliances shifted, and danger came from every direction. Bumpy learned how to adjust without losing his footing. He knew when to push forward and when to pull back. That ability to adapt kept him alive, while others around him fell. By the time Bumpy Johnson rose to power, Harlem had already shaped him into a disciplined and calculated survivor. The streets had hardened him, but they had also sharpened his mind. Every lesson learned in those harsh early years became part of his strategy, proving that Harlem didn't just test him, it prepared him. From a young age, Bumpy Johnson was surrounded by struggle, and it left a permanent mark on how he saw the world. Poverty, instability, and constant pressure showed him that life without control was dangerous. He watched people lose everything because they depended on luck or mercy, and he learned early that neither existed on the streets. Understanding planted the idea that power wasn't optional, it was necessary. Struggle taught Bumpy that being powerless meant being vulnerable. He saw how easily families could be pushed aside, ignored, or destroyed when they had no influence. Those experiences built a quiet anger inside him, not the kind that exploded, but the kind that focused the mind. He didn't want to react to life anymore. He wanted to shape it. Power became the shield he believed could protect him and those around him. As he grew older, control became just as important as power. Bumpy realized that raw strength without structure led to chaos, and chaos always ended badly. He studied how leaders moved, how decisions were made, and how territory was maintained. Struggle had taught him that survival depended on staying ahead, just standing tall. Control meant fewer surprises and fewer threats. The lack he experienced early on also made him deeply strategic. Every move he made was measured against the cost of failure. He wasn't chasing domination for ego, he was chasing stability. Power meant he could decide outcomes instead of being trapped by them. It gave him the ability to protect resources, people, and position in a world that took everything from the weak. Struggle also hardened his resolve. When obstacles appeared, quitting was never an option because he had already lived through worse. Hunger, fear, and uncertainty had trained him to endure pressure without breaking. That resilience made him dangerous in a different way. He didn't panic. He didn't rush. He waited, planned, and struck when the time was right. In the end, Bumpy Johnson's pursuit of power and control was born from necessity, not fantasy. His early exposure to struggle taught him that survival favored those who commanded their environment. What began as a need to escape hardship evolved into dominance, influence, and authority. The struggle didn't defeat him. It shaped him into someone who refused to ever be powerless again. Bumpy Johnson quickly understood that reckless violence was a dead end. Growing up, he saw how impulsive actions brought fast attention from rivals and law enforcement, usually ending in prison or death. Those lessons stayed with him. While others solved problems with fists or guns, Bumpy preferred to solve them with his mind. Intelligence became his greatest weapon. He studied people carefully, learning their strengths, weaknesses, and motivations. Bumpy knew that understanding human behavior gave him an advantage no amount of brute force could match. He listened more than he spoke and watched how situations unfolded before making his move. This patience allowed him to stay one step ahead in an environment where mistakes were unforgiving. Strategy guided every decision he made. Bumpy planned for long-term control rather than short-term wins. He knew that creating fear through violence attracted attention. Creating respect through consistency built lasting power. When force was necessary, it was calculated and controlled, never random or emotional. That restraint set him apart from many others in the underworld. His intelligence also helped him navigate relationships with both allies and enemies. Bumpy understood that today's rival could become tomorrow's partner. He used negotiation and influence to avoid unnecessary conflict, saving lives and preserving his operations. By keeping violence to a minimum, he reduced chaos and maintained stability in his territory. Law enforcement was another opponent Bumpy treated strategically. Instead of drawing attention to himself, he stayed disciplined and low-key. He avoided flashy behavior and unnecessary displays of power. This approach allowed him to operate for years while others around him were constantly being arrested or eliminated. In the end, Bumpy Johnson's success wasn't built on fear alone, but on intelligence, strategy, and control. He proved that power didn't always come from pulling a trigger. It came from thinking ahead, staying disciplined, and choosing battles wisely. His legacy stands as proof that the sharpest weapon on the streets was often the mind. Bumpy Johnson didn't just enter the underground economy, he learned how it truly worked. While many got caught up chasing fast money, Bumpy took the time to understand the systems behind it all. He studied how money flowed, who controlled which territories, and how influence moved quietly behind the scenes. This knowledge allowed him to operate with precision instead of impulse. He treated the underground like a business, not a free-for-all. Every move had a purpose, and every decision was calculated. Bumpy understood supply, demand, and timing, knowing when to expand and when to pull back. Thinking like a strategist rather than a brawler, he avoided the mistakes that destroyed others around him. One of the reasons he wasn't consumed by the life was his discipline. Bumpy resisted excess and avoided the distractions that trapped so many others. He didn't gamble recklessly with his money or his freedom. He kept his circle tight and trusted only those who proved loyalty over time. Control helped him stay focused while others self-destructed. Bumpy also knew that visibility could be dangerous. Instead of drawing attention, he preferred to operate quietly. He let his reputation speak for him while he stayed calm and composed. This approach reduced heat from law enforcement and allowed his operations to continue without constant disruption. He was skilled at navigating relationships within the underground world. Bumpy knew when to negotiate, when to compromise, and when to stand firm. By maintaining balance and avoiding unnecessary conflict, he protected his interests and extended his longevity. His ability to manage people was just as important as managing money. In the end, Bumpy Johnson survived because he mastered the underground economy instead of letting it control him. He stayed disciplined, strategic, and focused while others burned out or disappeared. His success wasn't luck. It was the result of understanding the game better than anyone else and playing it on his own terms. Bumpy Johnson understood that image was a powerful form of communication. His sharp appearance wasn't about vanity. It was about sending a message before he ever spoke. Well dressed, polished, and composed, he stood out in a world where chaos was common. The way he carried himself told people he was disciplined, confident, and not to be underestimated. His calm presence made him even more intimidating, while others raised their voices or acted aggressively. Bumpy stayed controlled and measured. That calmness created uncertainty in others because they never knew what he was thinking or what his next move might be. Silence, in his case, was often more powerful than threats. People quickly learned that his composure wasn't weakness. Under pressure, Bumpy didn't crack or panic. He listened carefully, responded slowly, and chose his words with precision. This made conversations with him feel serious and final. When Bumpy spoke, people paid attention because they knew every word carried weight. His appearance also opened doors that were usually closed. Dressing sharp allowed him to command respect in places where black men were rarely seen as leaders. He moved comfortably between the streets and higher level meetings, proving he belonged in both worlds. Ability to blend in while standing out gave him a unique advantage. Fear followed him not because he was loud, because he was unpredictable in his restraint. People knew he didn't act emotionally, which made his reactions more dangerous. If Bumpy decided to act, it meant the situation had already been carefully considered. That knowledge alone kept rivals cautious. In the end, Bumpy Johnson's sharp appearance and calm presence became part of his legend. He ruled without constant violence, using confidence, control, and reputation to maintain power. His look and demeanor weren't just style choices. They were tools that earned both respect and fear wherever he went. He became a rare black crime boss with real influence in New York City. Fully expand 6 paragraph. Bumpy Johnson rose to power during a time when black men were rarely allowed real authority, especially in the criminal underworld dominated by white, controlled organizations. His rise wasn't just unusual, it was historic. In a city divided by race and power, Bumpy carved out a position that few thought possible, earning influence in spaces designed to exclude him. He didn't gain that influence overnight. It was built through years of discipline, intelligence, and carefully chosen alliances. Bumpy learned how New York's power structures worked and found ways to operate within them without losing control of his own territory. He negotiated with major crime figures, holding his ground while protecting Harlem's interests. What made him different was that his influence went beyond fear. People respected him because he was fair, consistent, and strategic. He kept order in Harlem while balancing relationships with powerful outside forces. Balance allowed him to maintain autonomy in a system that constantly tried to limit him. Bumpy also understood the importance of visibility and representation. His presence at the top sent a message that Harlem could not be ignored. He became a voice for his neighborhood, making sure its economy stayed in local hands as much as possible. His leadership gave Harlem leverage in a city that often overlooked it. Law enforcement recognized his power as well. Bumpy wasn't just another street figure. He was a central player in New York's criminal landscape. His name carried weight across boroughs, and his decisions influenced operations far beyond Harlem. That level of reach was rare and hard-earned. In the end, Bumpy Johnson became more than a crime boss. He became a symbol of influence in a divided city. His ability to rise, lead, and maintain control made him one of the most powerful black figures in New York's underground history, leaving behind a legacy that still commands attention today. Wealth for Bumpy meant protection, stability, and status. Just money. Fully expand 6 paragraph. For Bumpy Johnson, wealth was never just about piling up cash. Money was a tool, not the goal. Growing up with nothing taught him that real wealth meant safety, control, and freedom from fear. Every dollar he earned was tied to a deeper purpose, making sure he and the people around him were protected from the hardships he once knew. Protection was one of the main reasons Bumpy valued wealth. Money allowed him to build strong networks, secure loyalty, and shield his operation from constant threats. It gave him the ability to solve problems quietly instead of violently. With resources at his disposal, he could prevent conflicts before they exploded, keeping both his family and his territory safer. Stability mattered just as much. Bumpy understood how fragile life could be when you lived paycheck to paycheck. Wealth gave him structure and consistency in a chaotic world. It meant steady operations, dependable income, and fewer desperate decisions. Stability allowed him to think long-term instead of reacting to every crisis. Status was another powerful benefit of wealth. In a city that often denied respect to black men, money gave Bumpy leverage. It opened doors, demanded acknowledgement, and forced others to take him seriously. His status wasn't flashy or reckless. It was quiet, controlled, and undeniable. Wealth also gave Bumpy influence beyond the streets. He could support people, invest in his community, and help those who were struggling like he once had. This reinforced his reputation as more than just a boss. He was a provider and protector. That loyalty strengthened his position and extended his reach. In the end, Bumpy Johnson used wealth as a foundation, not a trophy. It secured his power, protected his people, elevated his standing in a world designed to limit him. For Bumpy, money was valuable because of what it represented: security, respect, and a life far removed from hunger and helplessness. He supported his community while ruling Harlem from behind the scenes. Fully expand 6 paragraph. Bumpy Johnson never separated his power from his community. Even while operating behind the scenes, he remained deeply connected to Harlem and the people who lived there. He understood their struggles because he had lived them himself. Connection shaped how he ruled, quietly influencing the neighborhood without needing public recognition or praise. He used his influence to make sure families had food, rent got paid, and help arrived when no one else would step in. To many residents, Bumpy wasn't just a crime figure, he was a safety net. When the system failed Harlem, he filled the gaps, using his resources to stabilize lives that could easily fall apart. Bumpy believed that control didn't always need to be visible. He avoided drawing attention, allowing the streets to run smoothly while he stayed in the background. This low-profile leadership reduced chaos and kept law enforcement pressure lower than it might have been otherwise. Order, not noise, was his priority. His support also earned deep loyalty. People protected him because he had protected them. Information flowed to him. Warnings came early, and threats rarely caught him by surprise. This relationship between Bumpy and the community strengthened his position more than fear ever could. He also worked to keep outside forces from exploiting Harlem. Bumpy resisted attempts by outsiders to drain money and influence from the neighborhood. By maintaining local control, he ensured that Harlem benefited from its own economy as much as possible. This made him a defender of territory, not just a ruler of it. In the end, Bumpy Johnson ruled Harlem without sitting on a throne. His power came from trust, support, and quiet authority. By helping his community while leading from the shadows, he created a legacy that was complicated but undeniable, one built on influence, protection, and loyalty rather than public domination. Bumpy Johnson's story began with hunger, not just for food, but for security and control in a world that offered neither. Those early years of poverty carved a deep determination into him, shaping every move he would later make. Hunger taught him discipline, patience, and the cost of being powerless, lessons that stayed with him for life. As he rose through Harlem, that same hunger transformed into ambition. Bumpy wasn't driven by chaos or ego, but by the need to never return to where he started. Each step upward was calculated, built on intelligence, strategy, and restraint. The streets that once tested him became the foundation of his authority. Power didn't change Bumpy, it confirmed who he already was. Even at the top, he remembered the struggle that formed him. Memory kept him focused and grounded, reminding him why he ruled the way he did. He wasn't chasing attention, he was protecting position and purpose. His legacy grew because his influence extended beyond fear. People remembered him as someone who provided stability in an unstable world. He fed families, defended his territory, and kept order where chaos could have taken over. To many in Harlem, he represented protection when no one else did. Over time, his name became inseparable from the neighborhood itself. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a man in Harlem, he was Harlem. His story passed from generation to generation, told in whispers, books, and street memories. Lasting presence elevated him from crime boss to legend. In the end, Bumpy Johnson's journey from hunger to power defined his place in history. He turned hardship into strength and struggle into dominance. His rise wasn't just about wealth or influence. It was about survival, identity, and leaving a mark so deep that Harlem would never forget his name.